I'm going to read a few sections kind of put together from a text that I wrote about my bot, the Empathy Deck, which, although being quite a straightforward Twitter bot, has generated a lot of research for me into things like the automation of affect and emotion, the idea of the proxy, and also how to create entities like bots that operate online without reinforcing and reproducing the dominant kind of like attitudes that tend to circulate there. So racism, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, to name but a few. So for those not on Twitter or who don't follow it, the Empathy Deck is a bot that responds to its followers' tweets with a one-off empathy card. And this empathy card is basically a digital image combining my handmade collages with text taken from my diaries, plus a big collection of self-knowledge and advice literature like astrology, personality tests, and dating types. Each card has also got a matching emoticon on it, keyworded descriptively or according to its healing properties, creating a culturally contingent back end of remedies and expressions. So things like amethyst for money problems, passion flower for insomnia. The text's tone is somewhere between an overly literal friend, always eager to share or compete with a Me Too anecdote, a smattering of advice, and a demented version of the motivational quotes that feature on everything from teabag tags to posters to skin as tattoos, and also social media, especially within female-dominated platforms like Pinterest. The bot's card format also brings to mind tarot decks and their new agey cousins like Oracle, Goddess, Healing and Angel cards, which are often written by self-help authors like Doreen Virtue. Actually, it was my own guidance cards, which I've been making over the years as meditation aids and as a support for bad times, partly inspired the project. Drawing on these existing templates for self-advice in a broadly female-dominated marketplace, the Empathy Deck emerges from what Lauren Ballant calls an intimate public that would be recognised as part of women's culture that binds together disparate strangers through effective ties and a shared worldview. Magazines, chat shows, blogs, and other forums all help to bolster this culture, creating a space for sharing experiences that are both particular and generic. Heartbreak, family struggles, body issues, and so on. Instead of producing variations of You Go Girl, typical of liberal feminism and platforms like Pinterest, however, the Empathy Deck is more prone to communicating what Xian Guy has termed ugly feelings, signalling a refusal of the shiny, happy people of wellness culture who are normally conjured up by images of meditation, yoga, and self-help. Promoting a me-first, individualist self-care ethos, the pursuit of wellness often problematically puts the responsibility for feeling good and bad in personal rather than social structures. At the same time, anything that helps you live with and through bad feelings seems worthwhile, or simply necessary. The writings of Audre Lorde and Sarah Ahmed propose self-care as a radical act of self-preservation in a racist and patriarchal system that favours and promotes the flourishing of some bodies over others. As Ahmed says, quote, "We have to work out how to survive in a system that decides life for some requires the death or removal of others." As symptomatised by In Goop Health, Gwyneth Paltrow's latest foray into monetising self-care, wellness lifestyles usually assume and require privileged access, but tend to obscure the fact that feeling good is so much easier if you already have the time, money, and entitlement to follow through with the recommended rituals and products. As some of the examples from the Empathy Deck below suggest, I wanted to embrace the feelings normally banished from the wellness dream world, while still making something that might have a therapeutic side effect and help shake a shitty mood when it pops up in your Twitter feed. Throughout the Empathy Deck's lifetime, I've been tagged and mentioned numerous times in its followers' tweeted responses, as if the bot is a sort of version, stand-in, or proxy for me. As with many of my previous projects, like The Outage and Dark Archives, the Empathy Deck explores the distance between artist and artwork, performance and performer, which is a question for all artists in an era of publicly performed profiles, but perhaps especially for those like me who often appear as themselves in their work. Sharing many of the same followers and speaking in similar ways, is the Empathy Deck account just a lightly fictionalized version of @Erica Scorti? Perhaps a better question is why the @Erica Scorti account, and by extension anyone's Twitter account, could or would be considered real and not fictional, staged or artificial. For Bertolt Brecht, the theatre audience's tendency to uncritically believe in and identify with the illusory characters on stage was facilitated by the intoxicating effects of empathy. Instead, Brecht sought to prevent empathy, allowing for the adoption of a critical attitude towards the play, and by extension, wider social political concerns, through a series of distancing techniques like direct address, using placards and songs. These strategies were meant to foreground the artifice of the theatrical medium and, crucially, foreground the distance between actors and characters, so that spectators would be less likely to feel kinship with them as real people. Translated into the social medium, spectators suspend disbelief about the artificiality of speaking to a potentially limitless public as if addressing a friend with nobody watching. Like the characters in a theatre production, the Twitter self is often taken to be real, despite it obviously being presented on a social stage for others to watch. As a version of me, the empathy deck signals the extent to which all Twitter avatars are a performance, despite the audience's habit of uncritically accepting them as unmediated expressions of selfhood. Perhaps my lack of control over it means the empathy deck is actually more truthful than my own social media performance. It's certainly more liable to make me cringe, especially when sharing anecdotes of drunken puking or petty professional envy to someone I'm trying to impress. Becoming aware of social media as a medium also helps recall its corporate nature. As is well known but easily overlooked, Twitter and Facebook are profit-making enterprises that assume users will accept the exchange of a free service for the monetization of their participation and information. In an era of endless digital duplication, Hito Steyerl has highlighted the economy of presence, which increases the value of artists' physical presence at face-to-face gatherings like the talks, Q&As and workshops that make up both the event programs of most art institutions and the revenue streams of many artists, including me. Steyerl suggests that the proxy holds out the potential for withdrawal or strike or subterfuge. A proxy self could provide a decoy cover for a withdrawal from regimes of visibility, self-representation and promotion, allowing the artist or citizen to be both nominally present and physically absent at the same time. If I was to become permanently absent through death, as a proxy of me, the empathy deck bot could carry on tweeting out bits of my interior monologue forever in a twilight of digital immortality. TV dramas like Black Mirror have explored this potential for a proxy self to be simulated from digital archives, and it's easy to see how this could translate into a future service targeting the bereaved. As Orit Ashry has spoken of in relation to her own work, death and the eternal digital afterlife are the new horizon of capitalist expansion. Standing in for me as an always-on automated proxy on Twitter, the empathy deck almost spares me the work of being present on social media, responding to friends, professional acquaintances and total strangers, as well as coming out with unprompted tweets. For many people, especially those whose profession involves being a kind of cultural commentator, as it does for many artists, writers and curators, maintaining a social media presence can feel like real labour. Now that essay-length comments are acceptable Facebook etiquette, those who engage in lengthy, exhausting and demoralising Facebook arguments, very often people of colour, inadvertently provide a personally taxing and unremunerated public service by educating friends and other lurkers. Even those who avoid comment battles often feel self-conscious and cautious about their voice, or lack of it, leading to cycles of quitting and reactivation of social media accounts. Combined with the FOMO and self-comparison apparently endemic to social media, this constant low-level performance anxiety suggests that the work of being a coherent communicative character online is now a stressful, boring and time-consuming undertaking rather than the fun social activity it's sold as. Identifying the maintenance of online presence and communication as a new area of labour, apps and software are attempting to automate aspects necessary to it. For example, personality, tone, and voice. Email assistant Crystal, for example, claims to speed up the process of writing emails by personality testing both you and your recipient before suggesting what tone to use. Attempting to automate the work of authentic communications, it quantifies human interactions and tries to find a formula to replace them with. The new suggested responses when you reply to Gmail emails on your phone and predictive text acts like SwiftKey, which log into users' Gmail, Evernote, and Twitter and Facebook accounts in order to learn from them, fulfill a similar desire to automate effective communication. Empathy is also increasingly sought after by corporations trying to make interactions more human at scale. Reflecting a growing awareness that empathy is a key tool for improving profits, an empathy ranking tool encourages businesses to view it as a quantifiable skill, particularly in their customer-facing communications and PR. In practice, this often means cutifying the interface through adorable avatars, sprinkling emojis across copy, and adopting a chummy or emotive tone for even the most tedious correspondence. MailChimp, for example, promises empathetic automation through delivering messages that feel handcrafted and authentic to the recipient, along with plenty of emojis. If, as Eva Illouz argues, affect is made an essential aspect of economic behaviour within emotional capitalism, it makes sense for corporations to mobilise the production of authentic emotion at scale. However, scaling up true humanity for business presents monumental challenges, as the CEO of Teletech points out, presumably since humanity itself, and the qualities aligned with it, like affect, empathy, and emotion, cannot be yet replicated for scaling. As a kind of automated mail art project, the Empathy Deck also asks whether one-to-one, human-sized formats can be meaningfully scaled up. In previous mail art and gift-giving projects, I sent postcards, gave away drawings on FreeCycle, and emailed friends and strangers short Instagram videos in exchange for their adding metadata. The backgrounds used in the deck also resemble the handmade cards I give to friends and family, which are like little artworks in their own right. By automating both the card-making process and their sending out to thousands of recipients, the bot attempts to replicate micro-gestures of personal gift-giving at scale, so that instead of one friend receiving a unique card, 2,000 Twitter users, including quite a few other bots, now do. But the question then is, what is lost when gestures of friendship, giving, and interaction are scaled up? Is it the one-to-one singular quality of the exchange which is valued because of its assumed authenticity and even humanity? As Erica Balsam points out, the authentic is always aligned with the human and positioned against the machine, and is valued accordingly. Reflecting a, quote, persistent phobia in the machinic copy in Western bourgeois culture, deeply rooted in principles of private property and individual authenticity, Balsam points out that whatever can be created to formula and rolled out en masse, whether it be package tourism, coffee shop design, or customer service scripts, is denigrated as inauthentic, robotic, or fake. Generated by a bot and capable of endless iterations for a limitless audience and time span, the Empathy Deck embraces the fakeness of the machinic copy. However, its use of personal diary content comes dangerously close to providing a template for businesses to humanize their automated interactions. Despite being a bot, i.e. a machine, people's interactions with the Empathy Deck, especially retweets and replies, also suggest that it's somewhat capable of creating moments of relatability or connection. Maybe it's the unstaged quality of automation which is charming. Unlike humans, you couldn't really accuse a bot of trying to seduce, flatter, or manipulate you. Some of the humour also derives from the bot's occasionally bizarre confabulations of text, or the complete misreading of the original tweeter's meaning, which creates a bit of distance from the tweet that is in itself potentially therapeutic. Perhaps there's also comfort to be had in the knowledge that bots just don't get it and therefore aren't going to be replacing human jobs quite so quickly. However, jobs previously seen as innately human, like therapy, care, and journalism, and the skills or attributes they require, like attention, empathy, and creativity, are increasingly being automated. As Helen Hester has argued, digital assistants of all sorts are being drafted in to do the work of secretaries, mums, and wives, i.e., the effective and emotional labour of reminding, maintaining relationships, and patient listening, all traditionally gendered female. Drawing on Nina Power, she points out that trying to automate this work renders these skills both so valuable that they need loads of money to be spent on replicating them, and so worthless that even an app or bot could do it. Although therapy may seem like the ultimate human job, like other forms of care work, it's not beyond the reach of automation. The original chatbot Eliza, which responded very sparely to people's typed musings and questions, was herself a sort of therapeutic AI, or at least she was perceived that way by the people who interacted with her. At a time of increasing cuts to mental health services, automated therapy has been proposed as a way to alleviate financial strain on health services, replacing costly human advisors with bots like Little Shift, Woebot, and Tess, launched by therapeutic AI company X2AI. And described in her bio as a psychological artificial intelligence promising mental health care for everyone, Tess is accessible for conversation via a smartphone app. The fact that Tess, renamed Kareem for the purpose, was beta tested in refugee camps in Beirut suggests, however, that automated therapists will be administered to service users without the means to pay for more costly, longer-term therapy. If trials prove successful, it's not hard to imagine bot therapy eventually replacing cognitive behavioural therapy, the treatment most widely prescribed on the NHS, that was adopted as standard in 2007 by the UK government because of its apparent speed and success in getting people back to work. Both Little Shift and Woebot are based on automated CBT, seemingly turning one of the main critiques of this form of therapy, that it offers a manualised one-size-fits-all method that is imposed top-down on the client, i.e. that it's somewhat robotic and mechanical, into a selling point. The automation of palliative care and care of the elderly brings up similar ethical questions, and at least in the West, there is little appetite for actual robots replacing human carers. In Japan, however, lifelike humanoid robots, like my namesake Erica, are already being used in the care of the elderly, as well as other roles. In his book The Sound of Culture, Diaspora and Black Techno-Poetics, Louis Chude Sokai argues that the greater unease around anthropomorphic robots in the West is directly related to the history of slavery and the treatment of black people, which has bred an underlying fear of an exploited, enslaved race rising up to take revenge against its oppressors. Drawing on author Carol Capek's sci-fi play R.U.R., Rossum's Universal Robots from 1920, which popularized the word robot from robota, meaning serf labour and figuratively drudgery in his native Czech. He also points out the parallels between the ethical questions AI and robots raise now and the questions once asked of slaves. For example, do they have souls? Do they feel pain? Can we fall in love with them? And perhaps most importantly, will they revolt against their creators? While attitudes towards AI can illuminate wider ethical issues, the continued mistreatment of actual humans by other humans continues to be a more urgent consideration, of course, particularly when decisions of life and death are increasingly outsourced to machines, from military drones to computerized housing benefit assessments. Attempting to build a rudimentary ethics and consideration into the bot, the empathy deck's coding follows rules that allow it to operate autonomously in the public, non-art environment of Twitter. I worked with a coder to tweak the bot's original behaviour to make it more responsive to particular users, for example by ensuring that new followers get more responses to begin with, as a heads up that it isn't broken or ignoring them. A degree of throttling has also been introduced so that long-term followers and prolific tweeters will experience a tailing off over time to prevent over-familiarity fatigue. While the bot pays attention, it also demands tweeters' empathetic attention, particularly if, as I suggested earlier, the bot is seen as a kind of stand-in for me. And despite being the least immediately visible aspect of the project, the linguistic constraints coded into the empathy deck as its empathetic framework are to me one of its most important. This framework comprises a kill list of names of friends, frenemies, current and past employers, all of which help to avoid awkward revelations. For example, if a boss's name popped up on one of the cards in the context of a damning anecdote, or a friend's name exposed a secret disclosed to me in confidence. More importantly, the kill list also contains a huge collection of offensive words that I never want the bot to come out with. This is more of a precaution, since I can be absolutely sure that I haven't used any of it in my own diaries. And as the other texts the bot uses are self-helpy, they're unlikely to be a source of offensive language. But you never know, and rather than risk a freak conjecture of words, the kill list acts as a precaution against the bot accidentally saying something that I would not be okay with saying myself. Despite the fact that huge corp Microsoft didn't think this through before letting loose their own AI Twitter bot Tay, which swiftly learnt of its followers to tweet offensive racial slurs with abandon and nonchalance, to me this is an obvious move. As other bot coders like the guy behind Appropriate Tributes bot have already compiled these horrific lists and made them freely available, there really isn't a justifiable reason to not utilize them. Buttressing the kill list of words the empathy deck will never say and duplicating much of its content is another collection of stop words that it will never respond to. This covers very sensitive words like suicide, plus particular place names, and a comprehensive list of hate speech. Not responding to hate speech seems obvious to me, but as one audience member suggested to me once, a racist epithet may have been used as an example of what not to say, or in order to express disapproval of, rather than agreement with, racist attitudes. By blanking apparently well-intending tweets like this one, the argument goes, the bot is coded to assume the worst of people. To my mind, though, using racist language as an example normalizes it and the political attitudes behind it, framing it as just another word or just another opinion under the guise of free speech. So, I would prefer the bot to assume the worst. Given the rampant misogyny and racism on Twitter, I would also assume that people aren't using this sort of offensive language in order to disavow it, but more likely to harass and intimidate the people who those words target. Responding would not only literally duplicate the word's circulation and visibility on Twitter, but also would implicitly cast the tweet as one worth engaging with in the first place. And while I do believe there is real value in challenging people's attitudes where possible, if they're definitely not trolls, a bot couldn't be trusted to do this or to understand the nuances of context. Somebody could be discussing the alt-right, for example, without being alt-right, but a bot wouldn't know the difference. The alternative would be to fall prey to the liberal trap that Sohail Malik articulated while introducing the shutdown LD50 discussion at Goldsmiths earlier this year, namely the far right's formula for duping progressives into supporting them by crying free speech. As he suggested, this works by their making outrageous statements, for example about immigrants, then appealing to liberals' assumed commitment to free speech as a fundamental value of liberal democracy when pulled up on it. Casting those who correctly call it out as hate speech as the real fascists intent on shutting down free speech and, by extension, democracy, the far right leaves liberals in a quandary or trap of being unable to articulate a position of both supporting free speech and having a line to draw. By coding a line at hate speech, the empathy deck at least tries to build in the position that refusing to debate with or hearing the side of racists and fascists is perfectly consistent with a commitment to free speech and to empathetic relations. The stop words list also has a function called tragedy mode, which is always on, that prevents the bot responding to subjects considered too sensitive. As mentioned before, these include words like RIP, bomb, suicide, disaster, along with specific names and places, which get updated all the time to reflect unfolding events. While this measure attempts to convey respect for genuine suffering, the list of place names also reaffirms the West centricism of social media and of news reporting in general. Thousands of deaths and tragedies occur worldwide outside of Europe and America without being widely reported or shared or trending on Twitter. And Facebook's Mark Yourself Safe button has been criticised for the same reason. And despite the many inbuilt precautions, the bot also has an emergency stop function, which has been deployed a few times in response to tragic events. However, personalised, automated responses are clearly not appropriate for all situations. Of course, as a bot primed to respond to feelings, it's arguable that these are exactly the sorts of situations it could be on hand for to help out with. But despite the bot's ability and partial aim to contribute to its followers' well-being, as the legalese attached to the project says, this is not meant to be a therapeutic tool. in the sense of an evidence-based approach to supporting a grieving, depressed, or anxious person. And while it may seem that I keep pointing to the bot's limitations and what it can't do or can't be trusted with, to me this is the real work, the totally human decisions which shape any automated agent or AI, and the real humans who will be affected by it as a result.